If you follow me on social media, you probably already know about this cake. It took me a few tries to get it right, but I finally did. And if you're looking for an elegant dessert that you can serve to guests, I have the perfect solution for you here. This is my berries and cream cake. So delicious it was worth all the trial and error. But I slaved in the kitchen so that you wouldn't have to. So if you'd like to see how this is done, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name's Roy. I'm a home cook and amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today is one of mine, but it's based on a recipe that I saw in a YouTube video from a foreign country. I'm not even sure what country it came from, but it looked very intriguing to me. And if you follow me on social media, you've probably seen this a few times, both the successes and the failures. There have been a few failures, but I finally perfected the recipe and I'm ready to share it with everyone. I know a lot of my followers on social media have been wondering where this recipe is. Here we go. We're finally making my berries and cream cake. So let's go over the ingredients. I have here some baking spray because I have an 8-inch pan, and I also have a bit of parchment to line the bottom, just to ensure that it comes out easily. Now, in the original recipe, they used a springform pan, which is often used for cheesecakes. It's the one that you've ever seen. It has a little latch on the side. You unlatch it, it opens up and loosens around the cake so you can just lift it up. I know a lot of people don't have those. So I was looking for a way to make it in a regular cake pan so people didn't have to go out and buy a springform pan if they didn't already have one. If you do have one, you can use it. Be perfect for this. If you don't, shouldn't be a problem. I have here 1.5 cups of almond milk. That is at room temperature. All of my ingredients are at room temperature. You want your ingredients, especially for baking, to be at room temperature so that they come together more easily. Here I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. You could, if you wanted to try to reduce the bites and points a little bit, or at least just increase the protein, you could swap out 1/2 cup of this for 1/2 cup of vanilla protein powder, and that should be fine. But I'm using all flour. I didn't see that it made that big of a difference in the bites and points. I have here 8 ounces of my light homemade cream cheese. And if you have not seen the video, I did an introductory video where this was the first recipe that I did, but I separated it into its own tutorial video. So I will link both of those down below, and I'll card one of them up here. I have here 3 egg yolks, yes, at room temperature. Here I have 3/4 cup of confectioner sugar replacement. You could, if you don't have or can't find confectioner sugar replacement, and I do have some that I use listed in my Amazon storefront down in the description box. But if you can't find it, you don't want to get it, you can take regular sweetener and just process it in the food processor to try to get it a little more fine. That should work just as well. I have here 1/2 cup of granulated sugar replacement. The granulated sugar replacement is going into the cream, and the powdered sugar replacement is going into the cake. I have here 1 whole egg, and that is going into the cake part. I have here 4 tablespoons of cornstarch. That is going to help our cream to thicken up, as is the 3 egg yolks that we're using. I have here 1/4 cup of light butter. I can't believe it's not butter light. Here I have 1/4 cup of unsweetened applesauce. That is so that I could reduce the amount of butter that I was using and reduce the bites and points. Then here I have 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. The teaspoon is going into the cake. The 1.5 teaspoons is going into the cream. Here I have 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 pinch of salt. Now for the berry portion, I have 1/2 cup of blueberries, and 1/2 cup of diced strawberries. Now you could go a little bit higher. You could go 3/4 cup of each if you really wanted, but I think that is sufficient, and it doesn't leach too much liquid into the custard as it's trying to set. But each one, if you decided to weigh them, it's about 75 grams, around there. And the strawberries are about 4 large strawberries. So those are all of the ingredients. Now I'm going to do my usual thing of shuffling a few things around, and then we'll get started. Now we're going to start with the cake. One thing I failed to mention, and you should be aware of, is you want to make the cake portion of this at least an hour before you want to start making the full cake, because we are going to be putting part of the cake into the freezer. If any of you have seen pictures of this cake, it looks like there's a crumbled topping on the top, but there's not. What it is just part of the cake base that has been frozen and grated on the top of the cream. So we need to have some time for that to firm up. You could break it up in your hands, but it is easiest if you have it frozen when you're grating it. And I'm also going to split it into 2 pieces so that I can grate one. If you try to grate it all at once, I found that it starts to soften too much from the heat of your hands. So I'm going to break it in half. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first thing we need to do is mix our baking powder and our flour. I'm just going to whisk that together just to get that combined. Okay, so that should be good. I'm going to set that aside and bring in my larger bowl. And now what we're going to do is take our egg, light butter, applesauce, and vanilla. And I'm going to take my mixer and just blend that together until it's homogeneous. Probably take maybe 30 seconds or so. Okay, so you can see there are still a little flecks of the butter in there. That's fine, nothing to worry about. We're now going to add in our confectioner sugar replacement, and we're going to blend that together as well. Now the rest I'm going to do by hand. I'm going to add in the flour. I'll add in probably about half of it to begin with and just combine that. And you want to do it by hand so that you're not overworking the flour and getting a lot of gluten built up, because gluten will make this tough, kind of more like a bread than a cake. Okay, so there's that half in. And if you've ever seen any of the videos from other countries, they don't seem to work with spoons very often. I often see them at this point getting in there with their hands and blending it. I'm not that kind of baker, so I'm just going to use my spoon and incorporate everything. And you can mash down on the dough to kind of embed some of the flour into it. And it's going to look a little shaggy for a bit as you work on it, but it will come together. Okay, now that I'm at the tail end and most of the flour is incorporated, I will switch to my hands. I'm just not the type who's going to put my hands in while it's all still wet. That's just not me. But now that it's almost fully formed, fold that over and get the rest of that flour incorporated. And when you press down, it'll get some of the stickier portions exposed that you can then get the flour mixed into. And I will pick it up and mush it together a little bit just to get that flour in there a little bit more, and then use the damper outside to pick up the rest of that flour. So now I'm going to bring in my scale. You don't have to, you can approximate 1/3 of this, but I'm going to try to be as accurate as I can. Zero up my bowl. So the dough comes to 582. All right, so my friend Alexa tells me that it's 194 would be 1/3 of this. So I'm going to zero that out and just pull it out until it's negative 194. Negative 195, can you believe that? I'm taking it. All right, so set that aside. I don't need this. Then I'm bringing in my plastic wrap, and what I'm going to do is cut 2 pieces of plastic here, because as I said, I'm going to divide this piece for the freezer into 2. So that way I can keep one in the freezer as I'm grating the other one. And this can be approximate. You don't have to worry about weighing this part. I'm just going to break that apart and wrap that up. Now these 2 are going in the freezer. It's going to take probably about an hour for it to firm up enough. I've tried at a half an hour and it was still a little too soft, so I'm going for an hour. You may need a little longer depending on the coldness of your freezer, but I'm going for an hour. So let me throw those in. All right, so I have my 8-inch cake pan here. I've sprayed it with baking spray. Now I'm going to take the parchment. I've shown this previously, but in case you didn't see the other video where I did the caramel apple oatmeal cake, which was a big hit. This is how I usually do the pan is I'll put the parchment round in and press it down, and then I'll pick it up and flip it so there's some baking spray on this side as well as on the bottom to hold it in place. And then I'm just going to set that in there. Now we're going to take the rest of our dough and we are going to layer the bottom, and we're going to come up about an inch or so up the sides. You want to be careful with the corners. They can get a little thick. So you want to kind of work that so that it doesn't get too thick in the corners. But this will take a little bit of time. Just keep pressing it. And like I said, get into those corners so that you don't have really thick corners. And if it starts to tear a little bit, you can just keep playing around with it until you get it to the thickness that you need. And then start pressing up against the sides. And I do it by just rolling it through my fingers like this. And while I'm doing this, I'm kind of pressing into the corners, into the edges, so that the cake is not too thick there. And then smooth out to seal up any gaps that have been made here. Now this kind of seems more like a pie dough than a cake batter. And it really kind of is. It's kind of like a cake shell in a way. Now, if you want, you can take a measuring cup and press that into the corners to try to make sure that you're getting in there and not letting the corners be too thick. You just want to get that to go around and up the sides here. And you just play around with it until you get the bottom covered, no gaps, no holes, no tears, and get the sides elevated and even. Okay, so that looks pretty good right there. It's coming up the sides about an inch all around. It's approximate, doesn't have to be too exact, but that's what you want. So what I'm going to do now is put this into the fridge while the rest of the batter freezes, and keep this cold so that it doesn't start to soften and come down the sides. I'm going to give this probably about a half an hour before I start working on the cream portion of this. So half an hour after this goes in, start working on the cream, and then we'll wait for these to chill up. So I'll be back. All right, so it's been about a half an hour since I put the cake shell into the fridge. Now I'm going to start on the cream while those things are still remaining chilled. We are going to do that in a saucepan on the stovetop, and you can see I have both a spoon and a whisk. I'm going to whisk it early on just to break up the egg yolks. I am not going to whisk the entire time because then it gets a little too much air in it. So I just want to do it enough to break that up, and then I'll switch over to the spoon, but we will be using the whisk again later to add in the cream cheese, but you could use the electric mixer if you really wanted. I don't know why I had to demonstrate with that. Anyway, so to get started, I'm going to add the almond milk, egg yolks, sugar replacement, cornstarch, and a pinch of salt. And then I'm just going to break up those yolks and whisk this all together just to get everything combined. But as you see, it's starting to foam slightly. If we continued to whisk the entire time, there would be a lot more air incorporated, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to do it enough to break everything up and incorporate it. And I'm going to set this over medium-high heat. And now, because this is on such high heat, you do want to keep this moving so that the egg doesn't cook to the bottom, so nothing solidifies. And you just want to keep stirring this until it thickens enough that it will coat the back of the spoon, but I'll show you that once we get there. This will probably take 5 minutes, so give me a few minutes and I'll be back. It's only been about 3 minutes, and you can see that I have a very thick custard in here, and I'm going to just let this go for about another minute or so because I want it to thicken up a little bit more, lose a little bit of that excess moisture. But see, I kept stirring it, and if I hadn't, this would have formed a film on the bottom from the high heat and the ingredients not moving. But you can see it's boiling. This is what they call, as I've mentioned before, a rolling boil, because as I stir it, it's not calming down the boil at all. And I'm just going to stir this, let this keep boiling for maybe 2 minutes just to release a little bit of the excess moisture. Okay, so it's been 5 minutes. I'm going to turn off the heat and stir this a little bit more so that the heat dissipates. And now what I was talking about coating the back of a spoon, if you take your spoon and swirl it around, coat the back, if you put a line through it, the line is not trying to meet up again. It's thick enough to stay separated, and that's what you're looking for. Okay, so now what I need to do is set this aside, take it off of the heat. I'm going to let this cool for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then we're going to add in the cream cheese and the vanilla, and hopefully our frozen dough will be ready. So while I'm waiting for this to cool down a little and for that to chill up, I am going to preheat my oven to 375 degrees so that it's ready for us when we're ready. So I'll be back. Okay, it's been roughly 15 minutes, and you can see that the custard here has thickened up fairly well, and my oven is preheated. Now I'm going to take my whisk, and like I said, you could do this with the electric mixer, but I'm going to add in the vanilla and the cream cheese. Now the cream cheese is at room temperature, so it will incorporate a little more easily, but it still can be a little bit of a workout. So we're just going to kind of break up that cream cheese a little bit and then start to incorporate by whisking it in. And you want all of those little clumps broken up in there so that you don't get big clumps of cream cheese. Actually, this went together pretty quickly. I just want to make sure all of that custard is incorporated in with the cream cheese and that the cream cheese is broken up and incorporated into the custard. Now, if you don't get every single little bit of cream cheese incorporated, don't worry about it. This is going into the oven, so it'll have a little time to kind of melt into the rest of the cream. But there we have our cream mixture. Now, one thing I did want to mention, I'm going to set this aside for now, is this is only going in for about 22 to 25 minutes. But the edges can get a little dark. So what I like to do is use what they call a cake strip. And these are cake strips. If you haven't seen them before, this one is a silicone version. These are a fabric version that I got from Wilton. And they open up, what you do is you soak it in water, let it soak for about 5-10 minutes, then wring out most of the water and wrap it around your cake pan. And it comes with little pins to kind of close it in place. But if you don't want to worry about that, then the silicone ones are good because they just slide on. But you don't have to do either. What I'm going to show you is how to make your own little cake strip at home. You don't have to buy something special if you don't want to. And this you can use for any cake. And what it does is, because it's a cool, wet moisture that doesn't dissipate right away, especially since this one will be wrapped in foil. So what that does is keep the outside of the cake pan cool. Typically what would happen if you just throw it in is the outside starts to heat up, all that metal, glass, whatever you're using, and it gets very hot right away and starts cooking the cake. Typically that's fine. But if your edges tend to get a little dark by the time the cake is done, this will keep that from happening. What it will also do is keep your cake more level. If you've ever taken out your cake and it's got this dome, I typically cut them off and then make cake pops or crumbs for the outside of the cake with it. And if you're trying to stack cakes and you don't cut that dome off, you know what that looks like. It tends to be a little precarious and doesn't really fit together well. You usually have a big gap around the edge that you're filling up with frosting to make it all look smooth. Adding a cake strip to your pan keeps the outside cool, so that way the outer edge of the cake is not firming up too quickly. It's firming up with the rest of the cake. Normally what would happen is the outside of the cake starts to set already, and then all of the rest of the batter in the middle kind of has to go in, and it starts going up and you get a dome. By having a cake strip, or what we're doing here, a makeshift cake strip. Say that 5 times fast. That will keep the outside from heating up too quickly, keep it from browning too much, and keep you from getting a dome on most cakes. That's not a problem with this cake, but we don't want it browning too much. So I'm opting to use a cake strip. I've done it plenty of times without it and it came out fine. But I do want to have a little lighter of a color on the outside. So I'm doing a cake strip. What I have here is some paper towels. You can use a kitchen towel if you have one long enough. And this is enough to go around my 8-inch cake pan. I have enough foil to extend a little bit beyond that on both ends. I'm gonna fold this up, get this wet, and I'll be back to show you how to set this up. Okay, so I've gotten my paper towels damp. You want to wring out most of the water, but not all of it. And I'm going to lay this out. And what we're going to do is fold this up so that it's about the height of the cake pan. Now I'm going to take the foil and wrap that over our paper towel here. This is going to keep our paper towel from burning and help the moisture stay in there. And there we have a makeshift cake strip that you can make anytime you need to. If you're having difficulty, as I said, with your cakes doming too much or getting too brown around the edges, these cake strips are a big help. So let me grab the cake out of the refrigerator first, and it is nicely firmed and set up. You can press on the edges a little bit if they've shrunken at all, just to get that back up a bit. And while we're here, while I have my cake strip, I'm just going to wrap it around the pan and then just tuck this corner in to the inside so that it stays in place. You just want to make sure that it's holding onto the cake pan as much as it can. So that way when it comes out of the oven, our edges will be nice and lightly gold, not dark brown. So now I'm going to take our cream. We're going to pour our cream right into our cake shell here. And then I'm going to just smooth that out so that it's as even as it can be. And you can see that the shell that we've made fits it pretty well. So now the next step, I'm going to mix the berries together. I can then take them and sprinkle them on top of the cream. This is berries and cream after all, so we need those berries in there. Now I would imagine that you could, and I haven't tried this yet, but you know I probably will sometime soon, do like a banana cream cake. That would be pretty good. Bananas and strawberry go well together, so you could swap out the blueberries for some banana. Or you could use other berries if you prefer. I'm not a fan of raspberries, but if you want to put them in, that is your prerogative. So now I'm just going to press the berries down into the cream so that they are kind of held in place a little bit there. Okay, so now comes the part that was mystifying everyone on social media because people were thinking I was doing a crumble topping or some sort of crumb topping on top, and it's not. It's more of the cake. And this is firm, still a little pliable, but hopefully it won't soften up too much by the time we're done grating this in. So I have my grater, and I'm just going to put it over the cake pan and just start grating directly onto the cake. Now, if you wanted to, you could do this in a box grater and just sprinkle all of the little crumbles on top. And if you get some bigger chunks, you can leave them, or I usually break them up slightly. And you just want to get it all around the cake. And now that I'm down to the little dregs here, I'm just going to break those up a little bit and add them to the top, because it's a little challenging to try to get them through the grater and not grate my fingers off. So some bigger chunks, some smaller chunks. It's going to look beautiful, as many of you already know. If I see any pieces that fell in that are too big, I'm going to break those up. And I'm going to just spread this out a little bit because it gets a little too much in the center. So I'm just going to spread that around and grab the other piece. Okay, I'm at the tail end again, and they're too small of a piece. It's softening up a little bit much. So I'm just going to break them apart again, and then just smooth it out again. Try to spread that around. You don't have to worry about covering the berries completely. What's going to happen is our cake dough is going to kind of meld together and kind of seal in the berries. And the cream is also going to set and hold that in. So we have it covered. Now this is going into the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. I usually go the full 25, but it depends on how hot your oven is. But 25 minutes and I'll be back. Okay, here we have it, and I wanted to show you the browning on top. That's what you want, and you also want, when you shake it, there's a little jiggle. You don't want it to be sloshing around still, because that's not a good sign. But you want it to jiggle a little like a cheesecake, because as it cools, it's gonna set up. And speaking of letting it cool, we now have to let it sit in the pan and cool for about 15 to 20 minutes, just so that the cream has a chance to set and everything else gets to hold together. So 15 or 20 minutes and I'll be back to take this cake out. All right, so it's been about 17 minutes. I'm going to unmold this. Now I always take, as I mentioned in the caramel apple oatmeal cake last week, and if you have not seen that, check that out up here because everyone who's tried it has loved it. But for this, I'm going to show you the same thing that I showed you then. When I run my knife around a cake to loosen it, I kind of angle it toward the outside of the pan so I don't risk going through the cake. And I'm just going to lightly run around, detach anything that may be sticking. Doesn't feel like anything is, but I do like to go around a second time just to be sure. And usually I go up and down because if you drag, you may end up ripping something. That should be released. Now what I'm going to do first is take off our little cake strip here so that I have a firmer grip. This has done its job. This can now get thrown away. What I'm going to do is take a plate. I'm going to flip it out onto the plate first, then flip it out onto the cooling rack. So fingers crossed, everyone. Now see how light the sides are? That is because of the cake strip. It's been much darker than that when I did not use a cake strip. So now we want it right side up. So we're gonna take the cooling rack, put it on top, and flip it. And voila, we did it. To let this cool completely to room temperature, then put it into the fridge to let it chill for about an hour, just to really set that cream. But once this is all cooled down, I will be back to cut into it and show you what kind of deliciousness will await you right here. So I'll be back. All right, so there we have the cake. I had it in the fridge probably just about 20 minutes just to help it to firm up a little bit. It was already cooled down. Now I'm going to give you the macros for 12 servings, which is what I originally did, but also for 8 because there's only a 1 bite or point difference. I'm on the Better Balance plan of healthy, which is the equivalent to the old WW Blue plan, which is basically their current plan. So those are the bites and points that I give, and that way you can guesstimate, if you're not on one of those plans, about where you would be with yours. But I'm going to be doing it for 8 servings, so that's what I'm going to be cutting. So here we go. I got to make sure my arms are steady here. The first one is always tough to get out, but there you have it, the berries and cream cake. Now you can see there's still a little bit of jiggle, and it is slightly warm still, so I would definitely keep it in the refrigerator for a bit longer. But I wanted to be able to cut a piece and show you what you'd be getting. This is 1/8 of the cake. You could also do it as 12, as I said. And I will be giving you the bites and points for both, as well as the calories and macros. Now, if you did it as 12 servings, which would be a little smaller, then this would be 3 Better Balanced bites or Old Blue points. And if you're following calories, the calories would be 148. And if you were following macros, the fat would be 3.5 grams. The carbs would be 42 grams. The fiber would be 0.9 grams. And the protein would be 6.4 grams for 1/12 of the cake. If you went as I'm doing and did it for 8, then it would only be 4 Better Balanced bites or Old Blue points. And if you're following calories, 1/8 of this would be 222. And if you're following macros, the fat would be 5.2 grams. The carbs would be 63.1 grams. The fiber would be 1.3 grams. And the protein would be 9.6 grams for 1/8 as I'm serving it here. Now, I do, as I say, recommend that you set it in the fridge for a while and let it firm up. That could take a couple of hours. Now, this might not be a weekly dessert. It is a little more complex than some of the others I've done. But if you are having people over, this would be the perfect dessert to bring out. You'll definitely stun everyone. Now, if you enjoyed this video and this recipe, I would appreciate you helping out my channel and doing the usual. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit the notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video. I know that we have another collab coming up for healthy, quick, and easy dinner ideas. That'll be on the 23rd at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And I will be doing another live on that same day at 2 p.m. Eastern, because that is going to be my 2-year anniversary on YouTube. So I'm going to do a live chat to celebrate that. So hopefully you guys can join in. But if you hit that notification bell, you'll be alerted whenever I go live. And if you want this recipe, go down in the description box and you'll find a link directly to this recipe, as well as to the blog itself if you're looking for any of my recipes. Also down there is my Amazon storefront. If I've used anything that you're looking for, it may be there. And I have my Built Bar Rewards, Fetch Rewards, Skinny Syrups code, and my social media if you want to follow me over there. I have an Instagram and 2 Facebook groups that I'm part of. So check out that description box underneath this video where there's the title of the video, and then you'll see some words and then it'll say show more. Just click show more and that opens up all of the other information that's in the description box. Because I know some people have been having a little bit of difficulty determining where the description box is exactly. So if you just click show more down below, it'll open it all up. So I think it is time for us to have a little dessert, and I hope you'll be doing the same very soon. So until next time, bye.